Hey everyone, welcome to Brave Souls. I am back. I took some time off. I was recovering from a mild concussion, but I am good. I'm ready to start back up again on my regular schedule. Tonight I'm super excited to bring on my beautiful friend, Yael Adler. We're going to be just talking about Romania and just communism in Romania and also life after communism. I can't wait for her to bring her on, and we will get started as soon as she requests to join in. I will pull her in. Hi everyone, hello, welcome to everyone who just joined. Thank you for joining. Okay, Yael requested, and we're going to go live any second. Hey.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Give me 1 second. Let me just adjust this here. Okay. Great. Oh, why is it not holding? There we go. Okay. So how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation and talking a little bit about some history behind our adoption and how that really played a role in our stories.
Exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that next. Nice. Okay, well, welcome, Isaac. Hello.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to give it like a minute.
A few minutes.
Just wait for people to come on.
Okay. Sounds good.
So how was your day?
It was good. It was crazy as usual. You know, work, kids, life.
The fun stuff.
Yeah. What was your day like?
Work from home. Got some things done and pretty much relaxed up until now.
That's good.
Yeah.
I long to relax. Life with 3 kids doesn't really leave much room for relaxation.
I bet. I have a dog, and I know I'm not comparing kids to a dog, but just taking care of him is a lot of work. So I can't even imagine 3 kids. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Hey, Raya. Raya and I were just talking earlier. She's so sweet. You know Raya, right?
Yes, I actually watched your interview.
Oh, okay.
Although we haven't met, but I did see that interview, and that was great.
Yes, it was. She did very well. Hi, Foxy. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
It's funny. I go upstairs, and my mom's like, "Where are you going?" Because I don't really normally get this dressed up. I was like, "Well, Mom,
I'm just getting dolled up for my friend. No big deal."
Exactly. She's like, "Are there going to be any guys on there looking?" I was like,
"Oops."
I was like, "Mom, I don't do this for guys. I do this for me."
That's funny. That's good. That's a good answer. I like that.
Okay, so I guess we could get started. So actually, I'm going to start off with a little joke we had, Yael and I. So when we were discussing doing a live talking about communism in Romania and everything, instead of, I just blatantly asked her, I said, "Do you want to have a communism?" Instead of saying, "Would you like to talk about communism?" I just said, "Would you like to have a communism?" So that's been like a joke now. So all of you are going to have a communism with us.
Right. How can you say no to having a communism? I mean,
of course, who doesn't want to have a communism?
Right. I mean, really.
Oh, well, you look beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we'll get started. So tonight like I said, we're going to be discussing during communism, after communism, the dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, or Ceausescu, and just how much he was a terrible person and what the Romanian people had to go through because of his laws. And we're going to be reading some stuff from her book, from Yael's book, From Gypsy to Jersey, and just some things that we highlighted to go over tonight. So we will be reading off some pages. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Yes, thank you for having me, Michelle. It's great to be here talking to you. And yeah, I mean, we really just wanted to shed some light about the history because I think that's something that's not talked about enough is
Right.
the history, yet it's such a critical piece to our adoption story.
Exactly.
And, there was a reason why there was this surge in adoptions that happened in Romania in the early 90s. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, because it's really important to shed some light on that. So
Exactly.
do you want to give some background, or you want me to kind of just give a little quick history background on all of that?
So I'll just start off by talking about Nicolae Ceausescu. He was a dictator and a politician. I would say in the mid 60s, 1960s, until 1989, when him and his wife were both assassinated on Christmas Day, because I guess people just had enough of him. And I don't really know too much about him. I really didn't bother to go into detail about him, but just give a little background of the years
Yeah.
he pretty much ruled
Yeah.
Romania.
So,
Okay.
yeah, just to give a little background. So, after
Ew.
World War II happened, the Soviet Union, they occupied several countries in Eastern Europe, and Romania was one of those countries.
Mm-hmm.
And Nicolae Ceausescu, he actually led the Communist Party in Romania in 1965.
Right.
And basically, he was this dictator whose mission it was to increase the birth rate and Romania's overall communist population. So he put an enormous amount of pressure on women to have children because all he wanted was to have a bigger communist population and more communist people. So what he did in order to control that was he banned contraceptives and he made abortion illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, Romania had a really large foreign debt that it needed to pay off because he was borrowing heavily from Western countries in order to industrialize. So what was happening was in order to pay off this debt, he was exporting all of Romania's goods. So food, oil, medicine, all of Romania's resources that the people needed to live and survive was basically
he would
gone.
Pretty much like turn people's electricity off during certain hours and.
Right. So what was happening was that resources were incredibly scarce during this time, and Romanians just fell into complete poverty. So what was happening was women were getting pregnant left and right, and they were having all of these children, but they had no resources. They had nothing to provide for their children or care for them. So that was kind of the daily predicament that women were finding themselves in, and they didn't know what to do. It was just this really scary time.
Exactly. I mean, pretty much women were self-aborting and very dangerous, very illegal.
Right. So women were really going to all sorts of extremes because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know.
Exactly.
They felt like, some of their only options were to self-abort. So they would go to great lengths to do that. They would try to have an abortion, which was illegal at the time, and you could go to jail for that. They were,
and anybody
abandoning
involved
their children.
in it too.
Everyone involved would go right to jail. So, I was really fortunate enough to speak to someone who was a teenager living during communist Romania times. And she shared with me her very personal, emotional experience, which I'd love to share with everybody.
Please do. I was going to ask you about that next.
Okay, great. So so I'm going to share with you just an excerpt from my book, From Gypsy to Jersey. And I really wanted to, in this book, it's all about my adoption journey, but I really wanted to have a chapter in it that really painted a clear picture for people on what life was like at this time to really have an understanding. So I'm going to read for you now an excerpt from that chapter. Alexandra became pregnant at age 17 and was among the many Romanians who did not know what to do. In an effort to keep it from her parents, she initially confided in a close friend. That friend gave her pills to take on an empty stomach in an attempt to abort the baby. She took increasing doses of the pills to see if that would work. It didn't. What happened next was to be expected. Alexandra became extremely ill from the pills and had episodes of severe vomiting. Her mother was away on a trip at the time, so her father was incredibly concerned and wanted to take her to the doctor. It was then Alexandra realized she had to tell her father what she had done. In the news, while he was very upset, he also knew he had to find help and do it cautiously.
Mm-hmm.
He started asking around and finally found someone willing to do an abortion for his daughter. It cost a whole month's salary, and it was something that would be by far the most traumatic experience in Alexandra's life. It was November 1988. Alexandra had been instructed to go to a random address by herself, holding a bouquet of flowers. When she arrived, she entered a small room with the doctor and his assistant. She was told to lie down naked. She was shivering and frightened. No anesthesia could be used. The only thing the doctor gave her was a Tylenol. He told Alexandra that she could not make any noise because if the neighbors heard them, the police would come and arrest them all. Alexandra tried hard to keep quiet, but the pain was unbearable, and her legs moved slightly in response to it. The doctor warned her that if she moved one more time, he was not going to complete the abortion out of fear that he would perforate her uterus. Alexandra did her best to remain still, but it was impossible. Her legs spasmed again, and the doctor instantly stopped. He would not finish the abortion. Out of desperation, her parents called a good friend of theirs who was an OBGYN. She had just served a 2-year sentence in prison for helping someone else with an abortion. She wanted nothing to do with it. Alexandra's mother begged and pleaded. Finally, the doctor agreed to prescribe antibiotics that would prevent infection and hopefully ensure that any remaining tissue was eliminated. That was all she could do. Thankfully, it worked, but the trauma Alexandra experienced would stay with her for the rest of her life. Every day in Romania, desperate women were risking their lives in this way, or putting their children up for adoption, or placing them in orphanages because they were unable to care for them anymore. It wasn't that these parents were careless or didn't want their children. It was poverty and feeling like there was no hope, no light at the end of the tunnel, Alexandra remarked. Either decision, abortion or adoption, was an incredibly difficult one for any woman, and that is important to understand, she said. So some pretty powerful
Chilling.
words she shared, and her experience, I mean, beyond moving.
Wow. And she was 17 at the time, right?
She was 17 when she had that experience, and many women were, in the same predicament as her, and they didn't know what to do because times were just so difficult, and they were just living in such extreme poverty. So it really gets you thinking.
Right. Didn't Nikolai want to kind of mimic North Korea?
He did. The same communist.
Was doing the same thing there about increasing population and
exactly.
selling all their goods, and it's so disheartening just to find out what people had to go through during that time, and mothers who had to leave their children because they couldn't care for them, and
exactly.
how many children who just were not adopted.
Right. And it really gives you a chance to think of the other side, and not just what we as adoptees experience, but also the other side to that, and what the birth mothers had to go through. Right. And I think just understanding the history behind that gives some context to maybe some of the decisions that were made right. that led us to being adopted.
Yeah, and the fact that they just had I think what's the part that bothers me the most is self-aborting with
yes.
coat hangers and things that we don't even want to imagine they had to go through.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just a really scary time, and women just didn't know what to do. They felt like that was their only option, to abort or to abandon their children straight out, or to take them to the orphanage, or to just put them up for adoption so that they could, they felt maybe that they could have a better life in that way, because they literally could not provide for them.
Right. And our situation, well, maybe your situation. I don't know. Um, I really was hoping that my mom just or my birth mother just left me there because she couldn't care for me or afford me, but I don't think that was the case for me. But I know that your adoption was so after all of that. So it was like 1989. He was this Nikolai and his wife were assassin, which was
Yes.
the end of communism. And then we were talking about 2020. ABC was doing a 2020 special called
Yes.
it was like Shame of a Nation.
Right. So ABC's 2020 actually did a number of broadcasts in the early
Mm-hmm.
90s, reporting on, extensively on the plight of Romanian orphans. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, one of the well-known segments is called Shame of a Nation, which some people may be familiar with. If not, it's a very disturbing segment that they aired in an effort to really just shed light on the living conditions that these Romanian orphans were exposed to. Thousands and thousands of Romanian orphans were basically put in these facilities. And, they were split into these two groups, the healthy, productive children. And if a child had, maybe a mental or a physical disability of any kind, they were kind of like shoved into these asylums and these
Yeah.
institutions. And that's what Shame of a Nation showed. And it's
And how
very difficult
mistreated
to
they
watch.
were. They
Right.
were very mistreated. They were abused by their caregivers. They were
Yes.
abused by other children in the orphanage.
Right. They were
It's
caged like animals and they were just treated so inhumanely. And
sometimes there was like 2, 3 children in the same crib, sharing cribs, basically
yes,
sitting in their own feces, um,
yes.
their own urine, and just deprived of food and just neglected. It's very deeply disturbing.
Yes, exactly. So ABC really wanted to shed some light on this as kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a wake up call. And it was really during that time that people started flooding Romania from all
Mm-hmm.
over to, save these children, to adopt. And Romania, in a sense, became this hotspot for adoption
Right.
in the early 90s. And all of this that we're talking about, all of that plays a role into why that took place.
Right.
And, interestingly enough, it was one of those segments that, led my parents to me. While I was not in an orphanage and my story is a little different, that's how it all started. So, and I
Mm-hmm.
talk about that in my book. So it's kind of interesting how ABC 2020, played that role for my story as well.
Yes, yes. And that was not the case for me, but I was adopted in 1990, and I was actually the first year that children were allowed out of the country to be adopted um, from the end of communism and all. So, I mean, for that, I'm very grateful
Yes.
that that happened. So we were allowed to be adopted, and we didn't have to live in those conditions anymore.
Exactly. And I think it really
Yeah.
puts things into perspective, all of the different routes and paths that, at least for me, that my birth mother could have gone down. Um, I could have not had a chance to live a life at all. And I could have been in a very different situation and had a very different life. And instead, I choose to focus on the positive that my birth mother really wanted me to have a better life, a life filled with education, a life filled with things that I never would have had the opportunity to have if I was born in Romania, in the
Exactly.
Roma society that I was born into. And they're still practicing, arranged marriages, and I never would have had a career or the family and the support system that I have now. So, I'm very grateful, and I try to look at it from that perspective.
Exactly. Exactly. And I always say if I wasn't adopted from the orphanage, I could have been adopted into a different home, maybe a not so friendly home.
Right.
I don't know what my life would have been like if I were adopted with a different family or if I were never adopted at all. And when you're 16, they consider you an adult and you get thrown out of the orphanage and have to live on the streets. And oh my gosh, kids are subject to like abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, human
That's right.
human trafficked, drug problems, just very, very, like I said, very sad outcomes.
Exactly. So, while all of our situations and our stories are so different,
Mm-hmm.
it's really, kind of interesting that, we're all connected through our history. At least, you and I our adoptions are connected through this really critical time in history that happened in Romania and what led
Yeah.
to our adoptions and it's a big part of our adoption story. So, really, I would encourage other adoptees out there to learn more about the history behind their adoption and
Right.
gain a deeper understanding of that.
We're
Uh,
mostly international adoptees.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And, and it's important. It could be a really important piece to your story and
Exactly.
understanding that and talking about
Learning the
that.
history behind it. Yeah, exactly. But for us, I think just growing up, we just look at it as, okay, we're adopted. We look at our family situation, but we don't look at the history behind it of like
Right.
what caused the surge of orphans and what caused women to have so many babies and what caused us to get adopted, especially for you since the whole 2020 special. And
Right.
probably if it wasn't for that, you would not be with the family you are with now.
That's true. And, that's all things that I think about and reflect on. And, I'm glad that I was able to kind of dig deeper into that and learn more about the history and how that, played a role in my story.
Exactly. Exactly. Let us know if anyone has any questions regarding
Yes, we'd
this.
love to hear from you.
We are open to questions. Um, what else can we discuss about this? I'm trying to think. I'm actually looking through your book.
I
Make
love that
sure
you have it offhand. Thank you.
I don't leave home without it.
Uh,
Um, yeah, I do, guys. I do recommend if you want to learn more about the communism in Romania and also along with Yael's adoption journey, go get her book From Gypsy to Jersey. It's on Amazon. Go get it today. And Yael will be back on with me at another live to share her adoption story about her specifically. There was actually a part in there that I was reading about. Where was it? It was basically talking about families giving adopted families how they did not directly buy a child, but cash was still exchanged by hand and it was under the table money. That basically adoptive families were paying or giving money to the birth families illegally.
yeah, there was a lot of corruption that went on during that time. And I think, that often happens when people are living in impoverished conditions. There's a lot of corruption that can be associated with that.
Right.
And yes, there were many accusations that some things like that were going on, that there was money. In my book, I mentioned that, Alexandra actually kind of caught me off guard when I was talking to her. And I explained to her that, I wasn't in an orphanage. My birth mother tried to, she made attempts to raise me in the home for 2 years before putting me up for adoption.
Okay.
And her response to that was, "Oh, that means that you were sold for money."
Oh.
And I was like, whoa, 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 what makes you say that? It was a very intriguing statement. And, that was when she said that oftentimes that was the case, where money was exchanged because people were just so poor and there was just a lot of corruption that went on. And um, if you Google, baby trafficking and the baby market and adoption, you'll find a number of, pretty disturbing articles and accusations of things that went on at that time. And,
right.
We'll never really know exactly what happened, but,
right.
I I don't believe that that was the case for me. Although I do
I'm
believe that
sure it's happened.
it
Absolutely.
definitely happened, I'm
Yeah.
sure. And you know, that's just another example of how desperate the times were,
Right.
and kind of it's difficult, but to kind of put yourself in that situation of living like that, not knowing
Right.
how to provide for your family or yourself.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. So I get
Right.
that. And after I heard that, I read that in that chapter, I actually sat down with my mom on Sunday and I was like, I said, just out of curiosity, like, did you give my birth mother money? To see, even if it was illegally, legally, however she did it. And she said she did, but it was not. She never. I said, did she ask for it? She said no, because my mom wanted to ask the lawyer, can I give her some money?
Hmm.
And the lawyer said yes. So I don't really consider that, I guess, a trade-off. I think that's just
No,
more out of the goodness of her heart. But I know there are stories of babies being sold illegally.
exactly. And I talked about that a little bit too in my book, that, you know, if I was in that situation and I was adopting a child from a foreign country and I
Mm-hmm.
see, you know, how much they're struggling, you know, I would, of course, offer to help provide something that, you know,
Of
they may
course.
need. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be money, or, you know, maybe they need a refrigerator, or who
Or
knows what, you
clothes
know, whatever
or
they need.
something.
But, you know, of course, I would want to help in some way
Right.
if it was possible. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, no, no. Not out of the goodness of your own heart, and not if it's being taken as, again, illegally.
Exactly.
There was
Exactly.
something else in there that I wanted to discuss, which actually had me very upset when I found out. And I actually knew this without reading this part, but in 2001, CNN reported that Romania had banned international adoption because of the criticism from the European Union claiming that they were selling children. And when I heard that they banned adoption in Romania, I was so mad because all I kept thinking was the babies in these orphanages. And I kept thinking about me. I was like, you're doing more harm to these children by not letting them get adopted than by keeping them there. Like, I get you have to protect them, but there's other ways to go about it than ban. At least my opinion. Do extensive, research on these families that want to adopt. Make sure they have no criminal background, they have no other issues, or I mean, there's so many other things that they could have prevented.
Right.
But to ban adoption, it's like I said, it's just hurting the children more than helping them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, part of that, it was probably, they felt at the time that it was probably for the best and really the safety of the children, because, you know, at the time of our adoptions, you know, there were no really strict procedures in place.
No, no,
And things were, you know, I don't want to say it was a free for all, but
right.
things were just getting out of control, it
But there
seemed
were
like.
thousands of orphans that needed homes that they just, so many that were getting adopted every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think they needed to kind of take a step back and say, there are so many children and lives at stake here. And in order for, you know, them to be adopted properly, and in order to, you know, ensure the safety of the children and their well-being, we really need to take a step back and, you know, let's make sure that everything going on here is, you know, is being handled the right way. You know, the people
Exactly.
are coming into the country the right way,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a process and procedure that's going along with the adoption, so that, you know, really for the well-being of the child and the family.
Exactly. And it's to my understanding that they have not lifted the ban in Romania for adoption.
Yeah, I think it's very, while adoptions can take place, I think it's very different now, and it's very difficult to adopt out of Romania now.
But they
I think
banned
you may.
international adoptions.
Right, right. I
Right.
think you have to be from Romania, or I'm not exactly sure what the specific criteria are, but there is a very specific criteria now that people need to follow in order to adopt from Romania.
Right. And that bothers me big time. Oh, Jace, Jacqueline said, can you leave the book details when you post, please? Yes. When I put this video up, I'm going to put her book, the name of her book will be in there. And then
Thank you.
again, it's sold on Amazon. you can learn more about all about her story. So you are a gypsy. How do you say it?
So, yes. So I was born Roma, which is
Roma gypsy.
gypsy.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And it was very interesting to learn about all of the cultural differences and, learning about how different my life could have been compared to what it is now was such an interesting journey for me. And it's really given me an appreciation for my adoption. Because as I touched on earlier, in the Roma culture, women, my birth mother can't read or write. And I probably wouldn't have had access to the level of education that I was able to have. Arranged marriages are still practiced. I wouldn't have been
In the
able.
Roma gypsy?
Yes, in that culture today, arranged marriages are still practiced. And I just would never have had access to the level of opportunity that I have now. So I'm really grateful for my adoption, and I think uncovering my Roma roots has really allowed me to kind of look at my adoption in that way.
It's funny. I actually think like growing up, before I knew like a lot about Romania, and I didn't know who my birth parents were, I always thought I was a gypsy. I don't know why, but I always kept going around and saying, I'm a gypsy. I'm a gypsy. And I used to always think that I would, sadly, but I used to always think I had the gypsy curse. I don't know why. As a kid, I thought that. I just always like felt like, things always like kept going bad and like things were happening. And I was just like, I must be cursed. I must be a gypsy. And of course, I had no education, no knowledge of even what really a gypsy was all about. But I used to see
Right.
pictures and I used to see movies or them on TV, and I was like, I said, I'm a gypsy. It has to be.
That's so funny. Right. And
Obviously, that's not true, and I'm not a gypsy.
yeah, and I obviously didn't have a great knowledge of the gypsy culture either, because gypsies certainly aren't a common sight in Morris County, New Jersey, where I live. So,
Right.
I really didn't know much about them. So that was a pretty interesting and exciting discovery for me, because I really got a chance to learn so much about them. And there are so many stereotypes, and it's really unfortunate the way that they're portrayed cinematically, in negative lights a lot of times. And, I was ignorant to it. And until I met my birth family and saw what, loving and beautiful and welcoming people they were,
Yeah.
I really had no knowledge at all about the gypsy culture. So, I was glad that I was able to learn more about that as well.
Me too, yeah. And I really would love to learn more. And I know when I have you back on to share your adoption story, we will talk more about the Roma Gypsy, and maybe everyone could be a little more educated on that part of your life as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So feel free to check out, my story. As Michelle said, I'm on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. You can always check out my website from gypsytojersey.com. I'd love to hear what you think, and I appreciate all your support.
Well, thank you everyone for joining tonight and just hearing a little history of Romania. And thank you so much, Yael, for joining me tonight. It was really
Yes.
fun.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. I'll
Of
talk to you
course.
soon.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye,
Take
guys.
care. Well,
Bye.
bye.